Dear students, today we will discuss about forensic entomology and will identify that how insects can be used as an evidence to investigate the cases, to identify the time since death, that is to identify post-mortem interval, how much time has been dead body or dead or lying over a particular location. What do they do? What forensic entomologists they do? Now, as we have discussed, entomology is a study of insects, and forensic entomologist is a person who is keenly interested in observing, identifying the different types of clues that is related with the insects, and based upon that identification he can relate the particular time span that dead body or that a particular corpse which he may have under his investigation and determine the time since death. So forensic entomologist, he applies their knowledge of entomology to provide information for criminal investigation. A forensic entomologist's job may include identification of insects. As we have discussed, insects, they are one of the largest variety, or they are having one of the largest species that can be seen on the planet Earth. And even in the earlier development we have discussed, insects, they are or they have evolved since a long time and they are dominating this planet since a long period of time, and their diversity is also very much large. So the first job for a forensic entomologist will be, or the investigator will be interested to look after a particular type of insect which is generally seen near a dead and decaying matter, that is near a dead body or decomposing body. So being a forensic entomologist, his job will be to identify that particular insect, to identify the particular stage of its life cycle. So because we know insects, they have a typical life cycle which starts from eggs to larvae, and through different stages of larvae they form the pupa, and from pupa it forms an adult fly. So we call it as a metamorphosis, or we can call, if this insect it follows this complete process, we call it as a complete metamorphosis. So based upon the available evidences or available sample, the forensic entomologist has to identify the insects and type of insects. Next is he has to collect that sample, that insect sample or its egg or larval samples. Then he will have to preserve that sample and he will have to transfer it to the lab. So collection, preservation and transport, these are the major functions that has to be carried out by the forensic entomologist. Next is he has to determine post-mortem interval. We can call it as a PMI, that is post-mortem interval, means after death how much time has been spanned. That is the time between the death and the discovery of the body. Suppose a dead body is lying in a forest or in a jungle, and the forensic biologist has been informed about that after say 2-3 days. So exact how many days that dead body is lying over there, no one knows for sure. So in that case, it is the responsibility of forensic entomologist to identify the exact period of time that has spanned from the death of that individual or that body till the time it comes to his investigation. For doing this, he will have to have some evidences, some supporting evidences for that. So using factors such as insect evidences, the weather condition present in the near vicinity, because the development of insect is directly related with the surrounding environment. If the environment is say rainy season, if it is hot temperature or climatic condition are very differing, or very extreme, say very cold or very extreme hot, so the developmental stages of these insects, they will alter, they will vary. So therefore, while investigating death cases using forensic entomology, the weather condition is playing a very crucial role. Then its data has to be collected from meteorological department. Then the location of that body and its condition in that sense, how that dead body is lying over there, whether it is open to sun or bright light, or whether it is in the dark, whether it is freely accessible to the other organisms, or whether it was buried inside a soil, or whether it is buried in a coffin or somewhere. So all these things he has to investigate using the evidences like weather condition, location and condition of the body. These are the major functions of or major task of the forensic entomologist. After doing all these things, his major task is to prove this into the court of law, that is testifying in court, or to explain it that insect related evidences that were collected from a crime scene or a dead and decaying body. So being a forensic entomologist, his major job is to identify, second is collection, preservation and transport of that specimens, then determining the exact time of death, after that proving that in the court of law. Now do you know maggots can be used to test a corpse for the presence of poison or drug. Now we know that many times we find a dead body in which that person may have taken up a poison. So it can be investigated even using the insects as an evidences. How? The different types of poisons, they alter the developmental stages of the insects. That is, they can speed up or they can slow down the growth of an organism. So the drug, they are also playing important role in the development of the insects, or they alter the developmental stages of the insects. So, and they can be identified, they can be investigated in the laboratory. Now insects as evidences, forensic entomologists use the knowledge of insects and their life cycle and behaviors to give them clue about a crime. Now at a crime scene or during forensic investigations, two particular group of insects, they are playing important role. One order is of Diptera and the other one is of Coleoptera. So these flies and beetles, they are playing important role in forensic investigations. So flies, as we know, they are seen everywhere, but the household flies that we find, they are not the same which are found at a dead and decaying matter. So if you happen to find any dead body, say of any dog or cattle which is laying by your road or any open space, if you are a keen observer, you might have noted that the flies that arrives on that dead and decaying matter is very much different from that of the household flies. These flies which feed on the dead matter, they are having a particular metallic sheen in their structure or in their body. They glows. So they belongs or they are a particular class of enzymes, or sorry, class of insects particularly feed on dead and decaying matters. So the insects of order Diptera, they are the flies, they are routinely investigated and used in forensic entomology to identify the post-mortem interval. And after the flies, the next one is the beetles, or we can say the insects. These insects, they are again seen at a scene of crime. These insects, they may arrive at a later stage. Flies may be the first to arrive at a particular dead and decaying matter. Order of occurrence of these flies, after that another fly will come or another beetles will come. So that is explained by a process called succession. So succession means one after the other, which will come first and which will follow the other on likewise. So there are some insects which do not feed on the dead and decaying matter, but they feed on the larval stages of the beetles or the flies which feed on the dead and decaying matter. So these beetles may arrive on that dead body only when these flies have laid their eggs and they have started their developmental stages. Likewise, some beetles which feed on another beetles, so only then they will come over there. So we can identify these insects, we can identify these flies and the insects and collect their developmental stages, and based upon that we can identify the exact time of death. So species succession may also provide clues for investigation. Some species may be feed on fresh crops, while another species may feed or may prefer to feed on one that has been dead for 2 weeks. Means these are the second one which arrives on that dead body. It is not for the feeding on the dead matter, but it prefers to grow, or it prefers to have a meal of the developmental stages of the insects or the flies which has firstly arrived on that dead body. Now, being a forensic investigator, it will be his task to identify that insects that prey on the insects feeding on the corpse. So we'll have to have a close watch that which fly or which insect we are collecting, which developmental stage we are collecting, and likewise. So here is a succession wave we can find on the first column 1 to 8. Second is the principal insect fauna that arrives on the dead body, and the state of corpse, means this is the status of the dead body. So if it is a fresh, the blowflies are the first to come and bind or lay their eggs over there. So they may come within a minute or within few minutes to a dead and decaying matter. And the age of corpse, for the first 3 months we can find this particular flies over there. Next, the flies, the blowflies and flesh flies. So these are two types of flies. Flesh flies, as they specifically feed on the flesh only. Some flies they feed on the dead and decaying matter, but there are again some class of flies, Scarcophagidae and all, which feed on the flesh matters, specifically the flesh matters. Next is the Dermistidae, which feed on the skin and cutaneous structure of the cell, which feed upon the fats and other matters. Then other flies they comes and feed on them. Then another flies and beetles they come and arrive, and they start the ammonia fermentation process and all. Then the mites they come. Again dermistid beetles, now they arrive on that particular dead body and they make the corpse completely dry. That skeleton looks, we can identify the bones and all the other remains of the dead body. And lastly the beetles, they comes and they clear all the residual material that is present on that particular dead body, of that particular dead body. Now weather data is also a important what you can say supporting evidence that is required to identify or to investigate the entomological cases. Weather data plays important role in analyzing insects evidences from a corpse. Investigator will make note of the temperature of the air, that is surrounding air, then the ground or soil surface, the interface area between the body and the ground, the soil under the body, as well as the temperature inside, any maggot masses. Maggot means these are the developmental stages of that insects, the larvae and all that collected, we can call them as the developmental stages of the insects. They will also collect the weather data related to the daily temperature, that is the extreme highs and lows of the day, and the precipitation for a period of time, that is if it is raining, how much time, or if the weather condition, what is the climatic condition of that particular area, whether it is dry, humid, or what is the moisture content of this air and all. So this data is that has to be collected, as we have discussed. It is playing important role in the development of the insects. Other factor that might also affect the PMI estimates, that is post-mortem interval estimates, is the body, whether that body is freely lying on the open space or whether that body is wrapped with any material. That material can be your plastic, that can be clothings, that can be rubber, or whatever. As we find in some of the crime cases, the murderer, he may kill and put that dead body in a cartoon or a particular trolley bag or somewhere, or in a glass house or anywhere. So if that body is exposed, whether that body is exposed free to air or whether it is dumped or it is encased in any particular structure, has to be checked, because it is going to determine the overall development or the succession of the insect on that particular dead body. So whether the body is enclosed or whether it was free, exposed to the air, that has to be checked. Then whether other insect species present that may have affected the development of the other species, that has to be checked, that is succession. Then there are some species, some wild species which may feed upon the flesh and other materials. So scavenger species like some dogs, cats or the animals which feed on the dead matters, so that has to be checked. If they have done any change to that dead body, that has to be checked. Next is where these drugs or other poisons have been intoxicated, whether that individual has consumed any poison, whether he was poisoned or not, that has to be checked depending upon the developmental stages. Next is blowflies metamorphosis. Metamorphosis means its developmental stages. Now the blowflies are attracted to the dead bodies immediately after they smell or they get what you can say, a clue through the ear that this particular area, that dead body is lying over there. So these blowflies, they are very first to arrive on the dead and decaying matter, and they can arrive within a minute as well, and they start colonizing over there. They start laying their eggs over there in a single sitting. That fly, it can lay around 300 eggs, and that eggs, they have the favorable condition for their growth. They will start hatching, they will start growing. Now they have a complete life cycle that consists of that these blowflies have a complete life cycle that consists of eggs. It starts from eggs, it advances to the larval stages, that is first instar, second instar, third instar, and likewise. Then it forms a pupal structure or pupal cases, hard covering is formed, and after that the adult fly is formed. So this process where the cell or this particular fly follows all these stages, that is from eggs to first instar, second instar, third instar to the pupal stage and converting into the adult fly. This process is called as an complete metamorphosis. We will discuss in our BSc second year that some of the insects, they may skip some of these stages and they directly molt into the pupal stage and they start their development. In that case, it is incomplete metamorphosis. So here we will discuss about the complete metamorphosis. First, the adult fly, they lay their eggs on the carcasses, that is dead remains of that body, especially at the wound area and the areas that is, or we can call that as in loose openings, like the nostrils, the ears and all, or the mouth part or the cut part, where the flesh or the internal content of the body is exposed to these insects or these flies. So this adult fly, they lay their eggs on the carcass, especially at the wound area or around the openings in the body, such as nose, eyes, ears and anus parts. Second, the eggs, they start hatching and they start growing into the larvae. So these larvae, we can call them as maggots. It may take around 12 to 24 hours. It depends upon the many characteristics, or it depends upon the first of all the type of insects, the type of fly. It may depend upon within an insect also. It may depend upon the temperature condition, the surrounding environmental conditions, how the body is exposed to, whether it is freely exposed to the air or whether it is dumped, or depending upon that condition and all. Third is the larvae continues to grow and molt. They shed their exoskeleton, and as they pass through the various instar stages. So these stages, they are called as an instar stage: first instar, second instar, third instar. Lastly, these larvae, they enlarge in the size and developed into this pupa. So pupal cases you might have seen even in your house. So they are the developmental stages of these insects. And last stage is the adult fly. They emerges out from this pupal cases, which may take around 6 to 8 days. Again, it depends upon the type of fly. So in this representative example, it takes around 14 to 16 days from egg to adult fly development, depending upon the temperature and humidity level at the particular location of the body. So it starts from egg to the first instar, second instar, third instar, and this pupal cases, this hard shell or covering that we can find. After that, they break that outer covering and it develops into adult fly. So the early developmental stages of the decomposition, we can find these types of flies. The first flies that arrives to the dead and decaying matter is the blow flies, which may be green and bluebottle flies. So here we can find these flies has a dark blue or green color metallic sheen like structure. So they are having glow like structure on there. So these are the first flies to arrive on the dead and decaying matter. So this metallic thorax is the central part of this fly, which we can help to investigate or to identify whether this fly is a household fly or whether it is a blowfly, that is which is feeding on a dead and decaying matter. So blowflies are the first to arrive on the dead and decaying matter, which are followed by the flesh fly, which belongs to Sarcophagidae. So they are having strips over there, as like housefly we may find sometimes this on the dung and other materials as well. After that we can find the cheese skipper. Then we may find the mucidae, the houseflies. So these are the difference between the houseflies and the blowflies. So this fly is a housefly which we regularly find in the hotels and restaurants and even our household if we have uncovered materials. In that case household flies can be seen. But this household fly, they do not have any green or they don't have any metallic sheen in them. So here we can find in this particular diagram or in this particular chart, these are the small eggs. From these eggs, this first instar, second instar, third instar, and these larvae they are seen. These larvae further pupate into this pupal cases. These are the outer covering, and from this outer covering, the covering is when it is broken down, it forms the adult flies. So these are the stages of development of the flies or insects. Next are the beetles, the insects which feed upon the dead and decaying matters. So these are the first to arrive on the dead and decaying matters. They are called as the carrion beetles, which belongs to Sylphidae families. Adult and large feed on the flesh fly, or the fly larvae, the blowflies who have laid their eggs on the dead and decaying matter. These insects, they feed on their larvae. Next come is the rove beetles and clone beetles. As the name suggests, they are going to feed upon the eggs of the flies, and both of them they try to feed upon the earlier development of the blowflies or the developmental stages. And at the latter stages we can find the checkered beetles, we can find the skein beetles which belongs to Dermistidae family, and hide beetles. As the name suggests, they feed upon and they try to feed upon the interior core part of the flesh. So this is enough for today.